praise you, and we know that the things that are happening are due to your sovereign will and your timing. And Lord God, we look to Israel for the time clock, but we look to you for your will and your word and your comfort. We pray these things that you will help us in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so real quick, Luke 21:34. But watch. Isn't it interesting that the Lord was telling us to watch in Matthew 24, Luke 21 at the beginning here, Mark 13. He was telling us to watch the world. Watch like, remember the Pharisees didn't do. They didn't know the times, the signs of the times. But then he's kind of getting toward the end here and he goes, watch yourselves. Watch yourselves. Lest your hearts be weighed down with dissipation and drunkenness and cares of this life. And that day come upon you suddenly like a trap, for it will come upon all who dwell on the face of the whole earth. But stay awake at all times, praying that you may have strength to escape all these things that are going to take place. Isn't that a decree, isn't it, from God, from Jesus himself? They are going to take place. And to stand before the Son of Man. And every day he was teaching in the temple, but at night he went out and lodged on a mount called Olivet. And early in the morning all the people came to him in the temple to hear him. So he would lodge on the mount. You take his disciples. In Matthew 24, there's that's kind of where the sidebar meeting took place, was on the Mount of Olives. But in the temple place, he would teach, of course, in public. And now, this particular set of verses here is specifically, I believe, talking about the tribulation and people that are just before the tribulation, going into the tribulation, those kinds of things. Be awake because it's coming. And then, of course, the church would be taken out of the way. But he's warning two things. Number one, we need to be a part of those who are God's people. And then we need to be watching those things that he's spoken of before and watch our hearts. And then he's saying the people who dwell on the earth, everybody left, everybody who's on the face of the planet, which the book of Revelation calls earth dwellers many times over. Those who dwell, this is their home. They don't have a second home or even, a better home. This is it. This is their best life now, according to one pastor. Anyway, so he's telling us to watch these things, and then he tells us to watch our hearts. Now, I'm just caught up in this kind of a thing because we're going through Judges, and the more we went through Joshua and Judges and Samuel now. And the issue of the heart keeps coming up. And I did a little study concerning the heart in the Old Testament, and it always came down to their desire. It always comes down to what is my desire. And so we place that in our inward being. We want to say, well, what's the heart? And we say, well, it's that thing right here. And I don't think, that's just a symbol. The heart is our intention. The heart is our desire, what we want, what we really want to go after. And he says, don't let your hearts be going sideways, basically, is what he is saying. So Lenin once said, there are decades where nothing happens, and there are weeks where decades happen. And this was the case here in the last, the week that I left, and then the week that I was gone. And it was just really crazy times. And we're going to get into that, the convergence of all things. Now, when we watch these convergence of all things, we kind of say, now, wait a minute, the Magog thing looks like it got sideways. And the Psalm 83, where did that go? And some of these other things, but it still moves forward, the convergence of things. We've got another side of the war, if you will. We've got the same chess pieces are there, all right, that were there before the war, but they have definitely reset. It's like somebody dumped the board upside down, and you pick up, Russia, and you put them somewhere, and Iran, and you put them somewhere, and the United States, and you put Trump there now, You see, it's a huge disruption. It's like the whole I can't say the whole world got dumped upside down, but a major portion of it has gotten dumped upside down in November. And even this war, this major piece in Syria got dumped out, upside down in November. So remember November 2024, because Trump came in, Putin was pushed out, Iran was pushed out, and so just really, really significant things happened the last couple weeks. And we want to keep an idea on these conversions. I keep saying we need to watch this movie over again. I don't know if anybody's interested. Maybe we'll just ask or just do it, one of the two. But it's a really good movie, and I want to go back and review it. It's about probably 7 years old or more now, and I want to go back and review it and see how they're doing here. But a couple things. I always start with earthquakes, because Jesus did. There was a major one at 7.0 off of Northern California this last week. I don't know if you've seen much news on that. It was out in the Pacific. It was on the eastern side of the Juan de Fuca plate. So pretend that California is a plate, and you can see Redding in the middle of that plate. So you move that plate over to the left. You would have a left and right side, and so that red would be on the eastern side of that. There's a plate out there. It comes down to a point, but then it goes up. It's called the Juan de Fuca plate, and that plate is diving underneath the Pacific plate, the North Pacific plate, which is us, the United States. It's going like that, and it gets caught. And the more little earthquakes, honestly, the better, because it kind of just releases things. But this was a significant one, and I don't know if you recall, but the week before I left, there was a 5.6 or something out there. It was a significant little quake, but this was the biggest one out there in a while. And it just reminds us that plate is there. There's all the little quakes around it. Look at how they intrude into Northern California there. And that little batch of earthquakes there. A couple hundred now, I think so. And then another significant one, I think this one was in Nevada, 5.8 or something. That was a little bit, and so that would be kind of an aftershock, but look how far inland of that. So just something to continue to watch. This conference that I go to, I've been to a few, and I like this one the best because it's the pre-trib conference down in Dallas, and they get into the weeds. They put papers or proposals out, and you get to go up and ask questions, or people will go, and there was this one gentleman, he took it on the chin pretty good. Maybe we'll get into that at some point, but he wanted to change some, when you go along with tradition, Paul said, take care of the traditions, keep to the traditions of the church and those kinds of things. And in general, in the teaching area, you need to kind of do that. If you're going sideways on something, you better have your ducks in a row. But in general, if you go sideways, you need to be called into question, because there's so many traditions. But I do want to suggest something, that Daniel says that in the latter days, the wise will understand. So I just want to remind people, and I talked to Andy Woods a little bit and told him I want to send a paper to him. But the idea here is that we need to be careful about changing doctrine, and in fact, we don't change doctrine, Christian doctrine, but understanding of some things, because Daniel said that in the later times we will understand, and it's usually after something has been unveiled, we've kind of understand something. And Isaiah, the Lord talks about that in the book of Isaiah, in chapter 40 through 44 there. We need to understand these things. There are these things going on, and an unveiling of what God is doing. And so this is the Taal volcano in the Philippines, went off this last week. And then this came up yesterday, and it was a good question. Is that what the Hubble telescope is seeing right there? No, that's a concoction or a conglomerate of pictures being put together there, and it's supposed to kind of look like a scope, I think. But the idea here is that there's a lot of tension going on right now in the science field, and I wasn't able to elaborate on this too much this morning, but I will just a little bit more here. As we send these major telescopes out long, long ways, you have, you know, for every problem, for every solution, there's a problem, that kind of an idea. There's these problems that the scientists are coming up with. And this is called the Hubble tension. And it arises from a conflict between two ways of measuring the universe's expansion rate. All right? So, just, I'm not a physicist, but real briefly, if you have a assumption, or you presume something, and then you run with that and try to pin all of your text, all of your answers, it's got to fit with my assumption. That's not good science. And that's what science does, though. They think that there's a Big Bang theory. And so that now they're measuring everything based on a Big Bang theory. Everything should be moving out from one center, the center of the universe. Everything, the bigger objects especially, should be moving at a certain rate of speed, or a comparable rate of speed to the other objects, because there was one central point and a Big Bang. And what they're finding out is they've got a problem because things are moving differently than they would expect if there was one explosion, if you will, in the universe. And so that's where they're at right now. And this is a good problem for them to have. They should have this problem because they don't believe, most of them don't believe in God. By the way, there are very good Christian scientists, very intelligent, and they believe in, of course, the six-day creation. And of course, Ken Ham even talks about this kind of stuff for us. So, but I just remember this quote: "Contradictions do not exist. Whenever you think that you are facing a contradiction, check your premises. You will find that one of them is wrong." The scientists should check their premises. Okay, was there really one moment in time where there was the Big Bang? And then again, I did mention this morning, but it doesn't make any sense to me. I am not a scientist. I was a weatherman. That's the closest I got to it. And I love earthquakes, watching those, not them happening, but watching this kind of science take place. I like what God is doing, His nature. But it doesn't take rocket science. It doesn't take rocket science to suggest that you have to have something to explode. And so where did the something come from? It's just a simple, almost like a first grade question. Okay, this cup exploded, became the universe. Okay, where did the cups come from? And again, this morning we talked about the source, and the source is God. The source has to be more powerful than the result. It has to be smarter, or it has to be has more energy, or something to that effect than the result. And God is the source, and He's more powerful than anything or anybody, of course. Okay. Some good news: thousands in Vietnam hear good news at Franklin Graham Festival. So that is a really good news. Thousands there. Sales of Bible are booming. So that's some good news according to this. But watch. It's fueled by first-time buyers and new versions. That's good. Publishers attribute a 22% jump in Bible sales this year to rising anxiety. That's good, right? That's a good thing. A search for hope or highly focused marketing and designs. So why is the church still here? Because of this. Why is the Bible, why are we still here? Because of this. But now, did you see who is coming from there on top? This is from Dr. Lupus, and he says, the Jews hate this. So, the Jews hate this. Yeah, this is, it's anti-Semitism is within even the body of believers. It's very sad. Americans are reading, 19% read the Bible once a week. 15% never read it. And before COVID, 14% read the Bible every day, and now it's down to 9% read the Bible every day. Even though about 65-ish% say they are Christians in the United States. So that's not very good. All right. In the Middle East, another bleak Christmas in Bethlehem as Christian families quit the West Bank. In Isaac's church, the nativity scene has a figure of the baby Jesus lying in a pile of rubble. We feel that this war will never end. Now, we put something like this up last year. We talked about Bethlehem and Nazareth and other things happening in Israel. The Christians weren't coming and visiting. There's no money to be made, and the churches are laying kind of in rubble in some places because of the war. For a second year running, there's no Christmas cheer in Bethlehem, with tourists shunning the Palestinian city and many residents seeking a way out as the Gaza war grinds on. In the last year of British rule over the region in 47, some 85% of Bethlehem's population was Christian. As of 2017, the census overall population of Bethlehem was 215,000 and more, with only 23,000 Christians. And so that's down to about 10%. And they don't go around talking about it. And in Iraq, it's less than that. And in Syria, it's not much better. Sudanese Christians are among the hardest hit by the ongoing war, because you've got two Islamic sides, really, the government and the Islamic rebels there fighting against each other, and the Christians are caught in the middle. We're going to be caught in the middle. Anti-Semitism continues to rise extreme rates. Here's another case of that. In Germany, Islamists go to Christmas markets and start reciting the same prayer that Muhammad's army recited when they invaded Mecca and drove out the pre-Islamic population. Now, I thought about this, whether I would interject this in here tonight and start talking about this a little bit. But there is a professor out there, very intelligent, and there's a group actually out there trying to understand Islam. And I'm just going to give you kind of a foundational base here, and then maybe we'll talk about it more at some other point. But the Quran that most people use, that most of the world, even the governments use today, is what's called the Egyptian Quran. And there's another name for it, but and 90% use that Quran, right? Now, if you were to take that Quran and compare it to many of the others, you have thousands, hundreds and thousands of differences, major significant doctrinal, theological, if you will, differences, significant. So that this doctor and this group, they've decided that they're looking at these and going back and looking, and they started asking questions like, let's go back. Where's the source? Right? Where's the source? So they started going back. Okay, the premise is that Muhammad is the source, and Gabriel, of course, but Muhammad is the source. But writings about Muhammad didn't start until about 20 years after his death, according to tradition. And so what I'm suggesting is, and I'm going to put up some slides here at some point, but what I'm saying is that writers within the last 100 years say, according to their understanding and their learning, they go back to certain names, but there's no writing from those people. They're saying that these were written and these people wrote those, but there's no writing from them. And they go back, clear back, and Islam has said there's these writers along the way that go back, and the first real clear mandate and writings are about 20 years after Muhammad. But there's no originals. And there's no copies of those writings. Because remember, when Islam started, it was all verbal for, I think, the first 20 years. And then they started writing things. Okay, so what did Muhammad say? What did he see? You see? Now, people will say, well, the Bible's the same way. And no, it's not. And the reason it's not is because we have tens of thousands of parchments from all over the world that coincide and confirm what was written. And we've got, if the earliest complete writing is, let's say, 100 years ago for Islam, you know, we've got the LXX back to at least 300 BC. And there's parchments, many parchments of the Hebrew before that. And Greek has more than that. Okay? So it's if anybody says, well, it's the same or Christians are worse, it's not. It's not even close. We have many parchments of writings. And maybe we'll do a little bit of a study on that. I can show you where there's the Alexander, the Western, the Hebrew, there's a Masoretic. So what are these texts and where do they come from and how do they coincide with each other? And it's actually kind of fascinating if I can keep it down to about 10 minutes. So, right, so. All right, Lebanese Christian. Let's move to Lebanon for a minute. Lebanese Christian Parliament member Sami Gemalia, I'm pretty sure I didn't say that word right, isn't that name right, is the head of the Kataib party. He declared what he described as the end of the forms of external guardianship over Lebanon for the first time in 35 years. The guardianship of Hezbollah has ended. The guardianship of Iran and Syria has ended. And today, Lebanon is free, he said. Now, they are. The pressure is off of them in a major way. But Hezbollah's not gone. And they've moved to the north. And Iran, it's going to be very interesting what Iran does from here on out. And we'll talk about this thing as we go. So let's just get into the Middle East. Follow her. She's really good, Natasha Hausdorff. She's a brilliant she's a barrister and a legal commentator. So look her up, and she's got some great things to say about Israel. Here's Times Magazine of Trump. I think this was 2015, 16, something, I can't remember. Look, he's a bully, he's a showman, he's a party crasher, he's a demagogue. You know, then watch this. He's the person of the year. Resetting the chessboard, right? The same pieces, resetting the chessboard. Trump has assembled a team of China hawks. How will Beijing respond? In addition, Trump threatens 100% tariff on BRICS countries if they pursue creating a new currency. He is coming down on this issue. Now, it's really interesting. Here's a very interesting thing. Trump wants to bring our money home, many of our troops home. He doesn't want it to be the policeman of the world anymore, but he wants us to be number one in the world. And so if we say, he says, no, the dollar has to remain, the petrodollar has to remain, we have to be number one, we're going to have the number one Navy or military. Well, what are we going to do with those things? We're going to police the world? Well, he will. He doesn't want to, but he will have to keep those things that he wants. This is how I believe God changes the desires of kings, the proverb says. He says, the king goes, well, that's my territory, I want it back. That's my, whatever it is. And so that's what's happening with Trump. If you look at his desires, you kind of know where he's going to go. Oil is important to him. What's that mean for the Middle East? The dollar is important. Our military is important. The border is important. It doesn't take a rocket scientist, there we go again, rocket scientist to understand what he's going to do about some of these things. It is kind of a given. Trump posts on Truth Social the idea that the BRICS countries are trying to move away from the dollar while we stand by and watch is over. I think he means that. We require a commitment from these countries that will neither create a new BRICS currency nor back any other currency to replace the mighty US dollar, or they will face 100% tariffs and should expect to say goodbye to selling into the wonderful US economy. Now, it's really interesting. It always has interested me, especially in the last couple decades, last decade in particular, where when you watch the transition of these presidents, what is happening at that moment, where Trump had a really good economy, then COVID hit, and we got hurt by it. And then we kind of sustained that. The US economy kind of sustained that. No thanks to Biden, by the way. He did not open up the taps. He didn't open up, he opened up the borders, is about the only thing he did open up. And so it gives a lot of credit to the US economy because it kind of withheld itself, stood the test during his 4 years. I believe Trump, the way things look, unless God has something else in plan, it looks like he's going to really open up the US economy in a major way. So having said that, the BRICS has come along and said we're going to replace the dollar. Russia, China, they're doing everything they can. Everybody's doing everything they can. Europe hates us, but they want our gas and our money, and our military, by the way, to protect them. So we've stood the test, and now we have a man coming along saying, well, we're going to keep this hegemony. We're going to keep this status as number one in currency, economy, GDP, military throughout the world. We're going to maintain this, and if you don't play ball, it'll cost you. And that is a very, very significant leader. He did some of that last time. Real quick, I believe that God gave him a 4-year timeout for several reasons. One of them is, of course, for Israel, the Middle East, let things settle, the Abraham Accords settle. Then the Palestinian thing fired off the war on October 7th. And the United States and the world said, well, we can't have this. And Trump said, that wouldn't have happened. Let me come back and fix it. Russia wouldn't have happened. Let me come back and fix it. And so things, the Lord allows the whole world to see the other side of doing right and doing wrong and getting along here. And Trump's going to get another chance here. And if God tarries, Jesus tarries, we will see what he can do with an economy that's fairly strong right now. But we need to continue to bring inflation down, the cost of living, all those kinds of things. Meanwhile, there's reports coming out of Saudi Arabia and some of the Arab nations that are saying we're getting hurt by the gas and oil thing right now. America is hurting us with some of this stuff. The sanctions are hurting us, all these kinds of things. We need to do some other things like mining and sports and all that stuff. So you know that the prince has been wanting to take golf, live golf, and some of these other things. Now they've just won the 2034 Cup, and that goes along with their vision, their 2030 vision, and NEOM and all these other kind of things. So we're kind of playing into the hands of the Arabs. But and you're going to continue to hear the Arabs say, well, we want a two-state solution. And yet they want money and they want to build these things more than they want a two-state solution. I believe that with my heart. And that's going to push them forward, I believe. We'll see what happens, but it's very interesting. I did mention this on the last update that Putin signed off on a record Russian defense deal. It's major. Gaza, meanwhile, we're not done with Gaza. Over a year, we're not done with Gaza. And you would think that who's going to live in these places? Who's going to use them? Well, we're going to make sure that they don't. And we're going to continue to take down those tunnels, blow up the tunnels underneath these things too. So it is, this is a complete disaster for Hamas. There was another report of Palestinians saying, you know, we brought this, we allowed Hamas to do this to us. Even some Hamas members are saying we did this to ourselves. Of course, they won't say it to the world, to the United States, of course, because they hate us, but they're in a very, very dark way. Israel has begun carrying strikes. So this is where we were at the end of November, first part of December, Israel is bombing South Lebanon, keeping Hezbollah at bay. All right, that's where we're at right now. Hezbollah has tinkered with breaking the truce. Israel, fires back at them and puts them in their place a little bit. There's not a lot that Hezbollah can do right now. They're just kind of pecking away. And it's the same with Gaza, Hamas as well, shooting some rockets here and there, all right? That's where it was at the end of November, first part of December, right? The Israeli army takes responsibility for an airstrike in Damascus. That was on, I'm not sure if that was on the 3rd, by the way, but it was near there. And the reason I put this there, I copied and pasted this. This is from Live UA Maps. This is what was happening at the end of November, where they took care of Hamas, they took care of Hezbollah, then they were going into Damascus itself and some other places in Syria. Now they've been doing that, but this time they were taking out Hezbollah leaders, and some of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards were with some of these leaders and got killed as well. So around this time, Israel has softened up Hezbollah, even the Guard, and many of the weapons depots in Syria, especially from Damascus, but even north toward Idlib area as well. So Israel was a little bit responsible for softening this ground for the rebels, okay? Erdogan stresses, now this is what's going on right at the end of November, or first part of December. Erdogan stressed to the Assad government, he's giving them a warning, engage in a serious political process to prevent the situation from worsening. But he's warning them, and it would have been great if Assad said, okay, I give up, come on down. But this was like, what this reminds me of? It reminds me of the Japanese foreign minister with our Secretary of State back before World War II started. And Pearl Harbor, and we were, talking about treaty, and then only for them to pick up their decoders and run while the planes were in the air. And that's kind of what is happening here. The planes were basically, they didn't have planes, but basically they were in the air. The U.S. State Department at the same time, Syria, you must change your behavior. That's the very same day that Turkey comment came out, all right? This is what it looked like on 3 December. You have I just want to remind you that the yellow are the Kurds. They are Syrian. They're a Syrian population, but they're a mix of Christians and rebel Muslims and some others. And they're not, I made a mistake one time saying they're democratic. They're sort of democratic. They're not really democratic, but they're not hardcore rebels, and they're not hardcore, of course, governments, and those kind of things. So the Kurds are in the yellow. The green, the light green, were the rebels. Was the area that Turkey carved out for Syrian refugees, and they were guarding it and always bombing along those lines. And then in the dark green was the rebels backed by Turkey and fighting over there all the time. You remember all the maps. There's always green and red fights over there because the reds are Russians and Assad, and they're fighting the dark green. And then you can see that little tongue of dark green come down, and that was on the 3rd. And they came into Hama very, very quickly, like within a day or two, a couple days. They were going south real quick. When they got into that area, and especially starting surrounding Homs, I was thinking to myself, Assad, is Putin going to help you? He's not around. He's got jets, but he doesn't have a military. He doesn't have a standing military there to speak of. Is the Iranian Revolutionary Guard coming to your, because you've got 12 to 24 hours before they're going to be standing on the doorsteps of Damascus. And that's exactly what happened. Commanders of the rebels military operations department, we have taken control of 14 villages on that day. Syrian opposition announces a total amnesty. So now at this point, these rebels said to all the Assyrians, come on in. If you're Shiites, you're probably going to have to leave, but everybody else can stay. We're going to make friends. We're going to be one country again. It's kumbaya time. And so they're giving amnesty really to everybody. They will check their ID cards. They've already got a police force stood up. So that's what was happening very, very quickly on day 3. While Erdogan was bombing the rebels in the north. Erdogan stresses that Assad government in Syria must engage. They're still saying you need to engage. Nobody at that point knew where Assad was. Iraq Prime Minister told Erdogan that Iraq will not stand by to watch this dangerous repercussions taking place in Syria. Iraq was saying we're going to send troops. They didn't make it. We'll talk about a little bit about those. But so here's Assad's army along the freeways, decimated. There's a Russian convoy on the left. The Russian convoys headed back home to their home bases. They didn't fight them. They didn't engage them. Russia started saying, pack up and get to the main bases. So all the outskirts, the smaller bases were basically closing down. The defense war systems were damaged as well. Russian tanks, that's a Russian tank taken by the rebels. Jihadists near Damascus join the opposition against Assad. So this was in Damascus, even before Damascus fell, it kind of started falling from within. At the same time, the United States was in the east, of course, in the yellow area. And when Iraq and Iran started sending some militias across the desert of Iraq and coming into Syria, the United States whacked them with A-10s and F-15s, and they didn't make it to help. So the Syrian army just gave up. They changed their clothes, see on the right, taking off their uniforms. You can see they're dropped down there, all their guns, all their weapons, and they just basically give up. There was one report that the Russians said, if they're not going to fight, we're not going to come help. But that was an excuse. They could not come help. They weren't in. They didn't have the capability at that point to come and help. There's the Assad army fleeing. Here's Damascus coming into Damascus. Coming home. Syrians coming home. We'll get into, well, let's just do that a little bit now. The Alawites, Assad is an Alawite. He's not a Shia, but they would call him a Shia offshoot because they follow Ali and they do some significant things different that the Shiites don't like. They definitely are not liked by the Sunnis, all right? So, but because they were followers of Ali, which is a relative of Muhammad, and he took, there was a smaller group that took Ali and put him in charge of the caliphate. And most of them were Sunnis on the Sunni side at that point. But because the Alawites follow Ali, and Iran wanted access to the Mediterranean, Khomeini said, hey, we'll be your friends. We're close enough. And they accepted him, started giving him money, started giving him arms, and they started making a highway, of course, from Iran to the Mediterranean. Real quick, keep in mind that you really cannot attack Iran except from the air. You can make a highway from the Mediterranean through Iraq, but once you get to Iran, it's all mountainous. And nobody's going to invade Iran, maybe parts of the border area. But you're really not going to invade Iran unless it's by the air and missiles and stuff. So anyway, that's kind of the idea there. So the rebel forces at this point on day 3, they're down in now the rebel forces that were hiding or in place down south, and some people are coming out of their houses going, hey, there's an uprising. Remember, in 2011, this is where this civil war started. There was a funeral there. Assad attacked the funeral, killed some people. 11-year-old, I think it was 11-year-old boy was killed, and they were burying him, and then that started the Civil War. So there's always been rebels down here in this area. When I say rebels, green against the red. Red, reminder of Assad, and he's backed by Russia, which is red. That's how I kind of remember it. So, but the rebels' forces are claiming to have secured the town of Isra to the south of Damascus, with the FSA, Free Syrian Army, having now captured over 75% of the Dara area, which is a very significant border town on the border of Lebanon, and up next to the Golan Heights there in the blue. Remember that we'll get more to the Golan Heights there. And so they're saying, return to Syria. Everybody's welcome. Bring your household furniture. Everybody can come home. And that's what's happening. There's another. In all these films, you hear them crying, "God is great." So, Hayat Tahrir Asham is the main group. There's a bunch of groups, but that's the main group. They're the Syrian rebels. They're the green guys. That's how I look at it. We entered the great mosque in Damascus, and then what they said, we will enter the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem and the Kaaba in Mecca, Saudi Arabia. So now, if you listen, and the leader did not say this, but if you listen enough, and enough of these videos come out, you will get pictures of what the real deal is. Because you're going to have a talk of peace from this leader here. But this is what's happening behind the scenes. And they can't get away from it. A leopard can't change his spots. So this is what happened in 11 days. The green out of the bad rebels, and just that fast, Syria is gone. So really, there's green and it's a little easier. There's green and yellow now, so that's a little bit. Don't forget the blue though. That's the United States and Israel, but we'll get a little bit more of that in a minute. So speaking of that, this is along the Euphrates River. If you see close enough, you can see the Euphrates River. And this started almost immediately. A local Arab people in the town of Hatla are protesting the yellow presence, the SDF presence in their city. So there's already protests by the green. Turkish-backed groups, the green, have escalated their attacks on the vicinity of Tishree Dam, despite the announcement of a ceasefire. So you see the border there is the Euphrates. The transitional government in Syria expresses its gratitude to Saudi Arabia. So this is the green. Thank you, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, UAE, all the Arab nations basically, and Italy, for whatever reason, for resuming the work of their diplomatic mission in Syria. So they've already said, hey, we want to be friends with you. And this was on the 13th of December. We want to be friends again. Okay, there's the new leadership. Again, when Damascus was falling and some other things, the green, the rebels, had a terrorist parade with ISIS flags. And we'll get to... There's another shot of another place, location. Hamas Square, one of the big cities coming down in about the second or third day. Hamas Square, thousands gather to witness a HTF terrorist execute known Syrian Assad officers. Pro-Iranian channels report on mass executions and cleansing and ethnic and religious minorities by the HTS, the Green, and NSA rebels in Syria. Iran Supreme Khomeini. Our intelligence agencies provided warnings to Syrian officials months ago about enemy plots, cautioning them not to trust their deceptive shows of friendliness. Now watch where they come out and say, we told them it was coming. And then watch. He says the coup in Syria was planned by Israel and the US. So they're trying to say, reasons for why they weren't on top of things. The Iranian Quds, remember that's Jerusalem, force deputy, the Turks and some Arab countries deceived us in Syria. And so there's probably something to that for sure, because the Turks are definitely behind all this, and we'll get a little bit more of that in a minute. Hezbollah now affirms support for Syria. So you got the Shiites here in Lebanon, backed by Iran. They're now saying they're going to support the Sunnis in Syria. The new Syrian government announces that 700,000 Shiites received citizenship in Syria illegally, and it will be revoked next week. So there's no kumbaya moment here. There's a problem here already. 700,000 Shiites are going to be headed either to Lebanon or back to Iran. Opposition leader meeting with Christians. Okay, sounds plausible, maybe. They're meeting with them. Assad's navy is at the bottom of the rivers and oceans. The Russian ships are not in port because they were afraid, they were concerned. The planes at the Latakia Air Base, which is Russia's biggest air base, are still there. Some have left, but you can see multiple jets and cargo planes still in Russia. The retreat of Syrian forces threatens Saigon moment for Russia. Anyway, we're going to skip through a little bit of this. There are clashes between the yellow and the green going on to this day. Diazor, the blue, remember Israel's blue and the United States is blue. Reportedly, an American airstrike targets the dirt bridge connecting Al-Shamra and Al-Jazeera, the 7 villages, in order to prevent the rebels from entering the villages of the eastern countryside. That was on the 13th. President Erdogan, in his meeting with Anthony Blinken, noted that Turkey will take measures for its own national security against terrorist organizations, such as the PKK, which is in Turkey, the PYD and the YPG, which are in Iraq and Syria, and he combines them with ISIS. So he's telling the yellow, they are still our enemies. He's telling the United States that the yellow area is still Turkey's war. Now look at the dark blue bombs up there. That's Turkey on the border of the yellow there, the YPG there area, bombing Kurds, killing Kurds, and those are friends of the United States. Erdogan, watch this one. Syria will be cleansed of terrorists, and this will be our answer to those who are asking why we are in Syria. Okay, so now we know, going back to the power, remember the source of the power. The source of the power for the green, the rebels, is Turkey. And now we know that the source wants to kill all the terrorists and move them out of Syria and Turkey. Turkish intelligence was in the Syrian capital in Damascus on Thursday, just this couple of days ago. The Russian foreign ministry, relations between Moscow and Turkey have not deteriorated due to the Syrian crisis. And I would imagine that is true. Because at first, and I'm still not convinced of this, but at first when this started, I was thinking in my mind that, well, I did say it out loud to myself in my room, sitting in my room, I would bet that Russia gave up Assad. It's too much work. They don't need him. And in fact, it's better to have Turkey in control down there for Russia. He was a puppet for the longest time. And that takes Iran off the board in a major way in Syria for Russia. So Russia doesn't have to deal with Turkey and Assad and Iran. They only have to deal with Turkey. And that makes it a lot easier for Russia. We'll see going forward. Now, real quick, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but I'm going to do it anyway. In Ezekiel 29, Pharaoh is called to go to war. And he goes to war for the Syrians. He loses. He goes back home. There's a civil war at home. He leaves. He goes east somewhere, and the Babylonians, think of Turkey, the Babylonians back him and fund him to come back and take his land back, and he dies there. Okay? Russia just got kicked out of Syria. And so how will Russia come back? We'll watch. It'll be very interesting, because whoever it is, just like Ezekiel 29, when God said, I'm going to bring Pharaoh by the hook of I'm going to put a hook in Pharaoh's jaw and drag him down. It's the same thing in Ezekiel 38 for what we believe is Russia. Russia has established direct contacts with political committee of the rebel group. So they're going direct, Russia, with the rebels and establishing friendship there. The Iraqi prime minister, we support Syria. So they're friends. Now, real quick, with Iraq, remember that most of Iraqis, especially the eastern sections, are Shia. There's a major Sunni portion there as well. And so it's going to be, that's why there's such chaos in Iraq. On the ground outside of Russia, their main Russian military base
A Russian helicopter gunship circles above its base near Latakia on the Mediterranean coast in Syria. Enormous transporter planes maneuver around the airstrip, preparing perhaps to fly equipment out of Syria. The Syrian checkpoint in front of the base is now deserted. Past the Russian flag, a picture of President Putin still hangs, alone. The image of Bashar al-Assad is conspicuously absent. Beyond the gates, Russian soldiers stand guard. They're awaiting the arrival of another convoy. It trundles along the narrow roads towards the base. This has been going on for a few days now. The soldiers are pulling back their armoured vehicles, troop carriers and supply trucks from bases across Syria. Some are marked with a Z, synonymous of course with the war in Ukraine. But this is a war that is now over. The drawdown is part of discussions about their future presence in the country that's taking place between Moscow and the new government here.
And I would venture to say that they are talking to Turkey about that as well. Here's an interview.
President Biden appeared to take credit for Bashar al-Assad's downfall in Syria, saying, our approach has shifted the balance of power in the Middle East. Does President Biden deserve credit for that?
The foreign policy, the current administration, the Biden administration, has been pretty disastrous, certainly in that part of the world. There's a lot of mayhem that has ensued that would never have happened under President Trump's.
Okay, so Mike Johnson is saying that Biden didn't really help. So Isaiah 17 keeps coming up over and over and over. I think that's the number one question that Amir keeps having to answer. He's doing clip after clip concerning it. I just want to remind everybody, and I tried to talk to some people at the convention about it, that Isaiah 13 and 14 is about Babylon, 21 is about Babylon, and everything in between, 15 through 19, is about another country. So if we just single out Damascus, if we just single out chapter 17, what do we do with the rest of those chapters that are between Babylon 13, 14, and 21? What do we do with Egypt and Cush and the prophecies that are mentioned there? We only focus on Damascus, and it's not fair and it's not right. That's not how we interpret Scripture. There is a downfall of Damascus coming, and everybody is, because it's between those bookends of Babylon, and the other ones, several of them look like it's tribulation, isn't tribulation, and even Damascus and chapter 17 itself does. I believe that it's toward the end of the tribulation. So that's just on that real brief. So how did it happen so fast? The IDF destroyed much, that should be much, not mush, of Hezbollah and turned them into mush in Lebanon and in Syria. The IDF took out Iran's defense and many Revolutionary Guard commanders. Turkey prepared the rebels without the world's notice. The U.S. military kept Iran back, the Iranian militias back, but Biden didn't make this happen. When those rebels were coming back, coming across, those militias were coming across the yellow, the Kurds area. The United States saw a threat and took them out. They got too close to U.S. bases, and the Kurds were in danger there as well. The Iran Revolutionary Guards, they weren't even sent, and Russia's guards were not even sent. So Assad was on his own. What will happen now? The Syrian government will form, probably resembling Afghanistan. Now watch me, because it doesn't sound like that at first. But there's a few pointers that tell us that's probably the way it's going to go to some extent, and we'll see. They might try to pattern themselves more off of Turkey, but I want to remind you that Erdogan doesn't like the way Turkey has been. Turkey has been more secular, and Erdogan doesn't like that. So just kind of reminder there. Turkey will push for full Syrian autonomy over all of Syria. He wants to get 3 million Syrian refugees out of Turkey, and he's going to take advantage of the situation and scheme against the entire Kurdish territory and add the oil fields there as well. Turkey will have the backing of Russia to get the oil out of the fields in Syria and northern Iraq, if you can get there. That's the old Ottoman Empire. Erdogan wants it back. They don't really have the wherewithal, Turkey does. They're trying to get there to be able to have, they're not oil producers, but they know people who are. A huge question is, will the rebels work with the Kurds or vice versa? I don't think they will. I think they'll try, but I do not think it will work. Will the new government work with Israel? I think they will try, but it will not work. How much autonomy will Turkey allow the new Syrian government? These rebels will owe Turkey a lot. Erdogan will be, he's in the catbird seat right now. Real briefly with the other nations. Sudan, civil war, not going anywhere. Turkey's involved there as well, by the way. Turkey's in a mess. Yemen is still in a mess with the Houthis. Libya is still in a mess. You can see the red versus the blue. Still a civil war there. Russia in the red area, Turkey in the blue area. They're frenemies, but they're fighting over land there. And remember, hundreds of billions of dollars worth of gold at stake here, and oil there as well. So Magog, I think it looks like to me it's been kind of put on hold a little bit, and we'll see. That's all the groups that are stationed there. I just want to go over who this leader is. I think this is important. Al-Jilani, and it depends on what language you are in and how you're going to spell his name. But you will, it's pronounced Al-Jilani, was born in Saudi Arabia, but to Syrian parents. He's originally from the Golan Heights. That's where he renamed himself. Al-Golani. He grew up in Damascus. In 2021 interview shared that he was inspired by the Second Palestinian Intifada. So he wanted to be a warrior. He became a jihadist in Iraq following the U.S. invasion. Why? So see, he went to war because of the U.S. That's not good. 2011, he returned to Syria from Iraq to establish Syrian Al-Qaeda. So remember, 2011 was the beginning of the Civil War, and he came back to Syria from Iraq, neighborhood Iraq, to establish the Syrian sect of Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is not good, okay? They're the next worst thing to ISIS. See how this one's spelled? Al-Jawlani was a close associate of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. You remember him, the ISIS leader. He still has a $10 million bounty on his head. He has made public statements warning that Syrians, Druze, Alawite, which basically Shias, Christians, and Shiite minorities would be purged under his leadership. But you're not going to hear that stuff now. Al-Jilani did not comment directly, but answered, "We have turned to stability." This is what he's saying now. "The Syrian people are exhausted and we will not enter another war." He added that our concern was about Iran and Hezbollah, who has carried out the massacres. Now Iran and Hezbollah is out of the way. Will he make peace? He's talking about peace. The transitional government will examine the current situation of the Syrian army and consider how to reorganize it. So this is him fairly recently, a foundational ministry should hold to account those who violate public moral laws. That's what he said. So that's women wearing the garb, all right? We pledge before our God and before the people following, maintaining the unity and sovereignty of the Syrian territory, protection of all citizens and their rights, and working to restore the state and its institutions. We strive to achieve total national reconciliation and return of all the refugees, security and dignity, responsibility for all those who committed crimes against the Syrian people in accordance with law and justice. So he wants to send out justice there. We call on Syrian people to unite and stand together, he says. Long live free and proud in Syria, he says. May God peace, mercy, and blessings be upon you. We are communicating with the Western embassies and holding discussions with Britain to restore its representation in Syria. Our goals are clear and our plans are ready for construction and development in Syria. We are not about to engage in a conflict with Israel. That's what they said. Now, I want to remind you of some comments that were made here recently from Erdogan, saying that Israel is out to establish the greater Israel, the greater project. And so remember the power behind this guy. Yet the words he chose appeared intended to break those old bounds. The new triumph, my brothers, mark a new chapter in the history of the region, a history fraught with dangers that left Syria as a playground for the Iranian ambitions. It wasn't only Iranian ambitions, it was Russia's ambitions, all right, and Turkey's ambitions. He also said that they have given the Russians an opportunity to reassess the relationship. About Iran, he claimed that Syrian armed opposition harbors no animosity toward Iran. They hate each other. The HTS leader also said that after Iranian forces left Syria, there is no justification for Israel the Israeli regime to intervene in the Arab country. In other words, stop bombing us. Stop bombing the arms there, the depots, whatever, they're ours, is what he's saying. The Russian news agency, Russia has secured temporary guarantees to maintain its base. That's the air base, and Tartus, the naval base. And so that was just yesterday, I believe. Leaders of Deir Zor Council affiliated with the SDF announced the defection of their forces, going over to the green. Some of the yellow is going over to the green. They're afraid. And so, just a lot going on. Fights between the yellow and the green. Erdogan saying, we want Syria put back together, but we're not going to stand for Israel's quest there and all kinds of stuff. So, the greater project there. The situation between Iran and Turkey right now is Turkey is the big dog now. Iran is back on its heels in a major way. Now, there are some wonderful people, teachers. John Haller, I know, is talking about this, and I think he got the idea from Joel Richardson of going back to Daniel chapter 7 and 8, especially 8, and saying that that's a future prophecy of the goat, Turkey, taking over Iran. And I just want to say that that is not a well liked plan. Let me put it that way. By most prophecy, and I'll use the word cautiously, experts. Reminder that for Turkey to take over Iran, you would have to have a massive army going through the mountains to take them out. Now, they do have the army to do it. They do have the airplanes to do it that we gave them, by the way. But I think there would be major problems. However, if Turkey was to take out Iran, that would answer a couple of prophetic questions. And there was probably not a lot of people who would stop them. I'm not even sure Russia would stop them. At this point, they couldn't. But I don't see Turkey going to take out Iran. I want to say this, that remember in Ezekiel 39, all these swords turn in on each other. And so I think that it's more capable of doing that if they remain frenemies at this point. Anyway, I want to kind of wrap this up. I'm not sure how much I have left. Turkey says we cannot allow Syria to be divided again from now on. We can never consent to the country territory becoming a conflict zone. Members of Kurdish-backed SDF demand help from the U.S. as the Turkish military begins to move toward Kobani. And so that is going to be what is coming up. The fight here is going to be in the north between Turkey trying to take more land and trying to take it at least to the Euphrates. And then the question is, are they going to continue to go on? The major question, let's get to Trump. There's the bombings by Israel in Syrian territory. And they are letting them have it there in a major way. I want to get to the Druze area. They're not Christians or Islamic. They're a separate kind of a cultic. They want peace. Israel likes them as friends. You can see their area is in Syria. Israel is, that's the Golan Heights there in the blue. In the yellow is the no-go zone, and that was filled by UN troops, all right, until recently. And let's just get there. Trump. I support whatever gets us peace. Trump avoids backing his 2020 two-state solution offer. I support whatever solution we can do to get peace. There are other ideas other than the two-state solution, but I support whatever is necessary for peace. On the bottom, I don't want people from either side killed, whether it's the Palestinians and Israelis and all the different entities that we have in the Middle East. Here, this is Truth Social on the time that, on the 3rd, he said, everybody's talking about the hostages, we're going to go get them, or there's going to be hell to pay. About the same time, the UN on the 3rd, put forth a resolution to have Israel leave the Golan Heights. And you can see that only 8 opposed that resolution. And the United States was one of them, which was good. On the, let's see, what date was this? This was the 11th, just a few days ago. I need to plug in my computer. We're almost done. Just a few days ago, there was another resolution to mandate the United Nations Relief and Works Agency to support a resolution to the Palestinians, a National Relief and Works Agency to support the Palestinians, and the United States voted against, which is, again, just very interesting what the United States continues to do, knowing Biden's mind. But that's going to be a reality here in January. Trump will speak the truth, and he'll tell the truth, and he will perform it, I believe. So, briefly, and we'll end with this. The UN sends additional troops to Syria. All right? So, more UN troops. And they're going to go in that purple area there. So the Golan Heights are up against Tiberias, or the Sea of Tiberias, or that's the Sea of Galilee down there. That's the Golan Heights, which, remember, Trump said that belongs to Israel. And the disputed area is in the purple. And then on the other side of that is the Syrian, what they call the Syrian Golan Heights, all right? Israel is bombing all over that, and right now they basically own it. So the UNIFIL, the blue on the right, they were the UN force in Lebanon. How did they do? Not very well. The UN DOF force was the one in the Golan, and they're going to be backed up with more. How did they do? Not very well. This is a joke. So Israel has moved into the Golan. They're up on the Golan Heights, and they're going to keep it. They will not be pushed off of there. So there's a picture of Israel, and they own the 2 blues, and now basically they own the purple. They're bombing Syria's forces. And last couple slides. Look at these soldiers. Look what they have on their patch. They have the temple. They have the temple on their shoulder. The UN foreign policy chief, the fall of Assad regime is a fatal blow to Putin and Iranian regimes. Now, if I remember right, the word fatal means he dies, right? But we're reminding ourselves that according to the Bible, the Lord will turn him around and bring him down. And so the chessboard has been reset in a major way. It's really exciting to watch, at least for a nerd like me, I guess. But to try to figure out kind of what's going to go forward here, I would just summarize with this. I don't believe the green is going to be friendly for too long. They're backed by Turkey, who isn't friendly at all. They will begin to try to take all of Syria because it's theirs if the Kurds won't unite. So it's going to be really up to the Kurds. The United States will play a major part of that in what Trump decides. He wanted to leave Syria, and then when he talked about the oil, and the oil was a big issue, he stayed. And we have Iraqi bases with all the jets that we need to back up and keep that oil. So it's going to depend on what Trump does. I believe he will stay there for a while. Depends on whether he will stay there the whole time. Israel will grow stronger. I've been saying that for a while now. We're in Ezekiel 36 and 37. They will continue to grow stronger. Now with Trump coming back, Huckabee there, they're going to be going stronger. And Iran is on their heels. Russia is on their heels. And something has to change in a major way. All the other major players in Ezekiel 38 are in a civil war. And they've been there for over a decade. So nothing's going to change quick. In fact, we're really in very exciting times to see Israel grow strong. But the anti-Semitism, I think October 7th and what Israel has done afterwards is going to make anti-Semitism grow in a major way, especially in the universities and the big cities. And again, I want to suggest this, that down the road, the Christians will be called in as targets at some point. We will begin to be persecuted in a major way at some point. But I think there's a major setback because we have a president who likes to say Merry Christmas. So let's pray. Lord, we love you and thank you for your word and that we can understand it. We know there's a lot of information here to understand, Lord, but just to know that you are in charge, that you, just like Isaiah chapter 7, when you said those kings were going to come down in 65 years, and you changed it into 1 year, less than a year, Lord, that you changed this, you allowed this to change in the last week, where Turkey has had a desire to take Syria, and basically he's done that. What will you allow him to do more? And what will you do with Russia? And what will you do with Trump and his presidency? We look forward to seeing what you will do. I think, Lord, out of all this, we would like an opportunity to teach and preach Jesus Christ. We would like to teach others about the salvation that is in you, and that, Lord God, there's an opportunity for all of that now. We pray that that will happen in a great way. But in your timing and in your way, when you want these dominoes to fall in place so that your son Israel will return to the fold, will return and in fact, for the first time, believe in Jesus Christ, the Messiah, their Messiah. We look forward to that time. But until then, keep us and help us understand you and love you in Jesus' precious name. Amen.